Hello everybody. We are going to be discussing today the next step of the IGS project, and that is going to be the parent historical essay. So for this you are going to interview a parent about the three most significant or impactful major U.S. National news events that they remember. And so this could be something that's happened recently. It could be something that happened a long time ago when they were younger. But like basically it's going to be similar to you, only you have to do the interviewing. So some of the events could be similar, some might be very different than what you chose. So step one is you're simply going to have to ask your parents or parent if you can interview them about this and set up a time. You're busy, parents are busy. You're going to want to actually set up a time when you can interview them. And so for this, you may want to just tell them what it's going to be about first. Don't just spring it on them. Maybe give them a day or two to think about it, and then you can set up an interview. And so the question number one is simply, if you had to pick the three most significant or impactful major U.S. national news events that you remember firsthand, what would they be? All right, maybe somebody will mention a person, but you need to connect this person to um, an event. So they couldn't just say, for instance, here in the example, Michael Jackson. Maybe it would be Michael Jackson's death, right? Or it might be, maybe it's Joe Mauer winning the MVP award or something like that is what you would pick. Question two, what specific details do you remember about each of these events? And so you'll need to have something to write it down or type it down. Maybe you're recording it. Questions like, where were you when you heard about it? What details of the event stick out most? How old were you when this happened? Some of them aren't going to remember all these details, but there are some details that they will remember. So you're looking for the details that they remember. And they may not remember the event, perfectly. That's okay. You're looking for what they remember about it. I know when I asked my dad where he was when Kennedy was killed, he said he was riding his bike. Well, I think most kids heard about it in school, but that's what he remembers about it. He was riding his bike and some guy yelled, "Hey, don't you kids know that Kennedy was killed?" And so that's what he remembers. I'm sure they probably announced it in school, but that's not what necessarily what he remembers about it. So those are the things you're going to kind of record. What do you think that the event, question three, why do you think that the event was or remains significant to you today? Question four, how did this event change you, your lifestyle, your perception, or your thinking? So I know, like me personally, like one of the events I would choose is when I was like in third or fourth grade, the Oklahoma City bombing occurred. And I remember being in a car driving around, somebody was driving me around, a friend's parent, and it was on the radio. And I remember listening to it thinking, this sounds like a big deal. And I ran inside, and there it was, on TV when I got dropped off, and I remember looking at the video of it and thinking how horrible it was. So anytime I see like a horrible event, that's one of the things that I remember back to, who I was with and what was going on. So something like that might be what they think of. So then comes the writing part. Similar to your own historical essay, in that first paragraph, you are going to introduce your parent and you are going to introduce the three events that you're writing about. These three events you may have a little less understanding of than the events that you learned about or you wrote about in the first paper. So this introduction should be about 5 sentences. Then paragraph number 2 is the first event. Paragraph number 3 is the third event. Paragraph number 4 is the third event, right? And then finally, paragraph 5, similar to your first paper, you're going to write a conclusion. What did you learn about the interviewee from their answers in this discussion? How did this change your perspective of the events and or the interviewee? Maybe some of these events are new to you. Maybe you learned a few new things during this interview process. So this is going to be the next paper. If you are working on this, the next step after this is going to be a grandparent. And you are going to you're going to interview a grandparent about this, about their lives. So it's going to be a different type of paper than the last two. This next paper is going to be 2 pages. All right, it's going to be 10 to 12 point font. 2 pages single spaced. But before you do that, you're going to need to come up with some questions. And so we have a list of questions here that you can look through. You don't have to use all these. You don't have to use any of them. You can come up with your own. But the key really here is going to be coming up with follow-up questions as well. What was your grandpa? What was your first car? Oh, he gives you the name of his first car, and then don't just move on. You follow up with, well, did anything interesting ever happen with that car? Do you have any special memories of it? Or do you ever see any old cars like that driving around today? Those types of things. So we've got some different questions that you can ask. And then also, you can write your own memories of a grandparent in this. If you don't have a grandparent that's still alive, now it becomes a little more difficult, but you can still do this part of the project. You're just going to need to set up interviews with parents, aunts and uncles, older brothers and sisters, maybe a grandparent that's still alive, and what they remember about that grandparent that is deceased. So that's how you would do that. Is it's going to have a different feel to it than if you're interviewing a grandparent, but you can still get a biography written about a grandparent. And we'll talk more about that, but the next step is simply going to be set up an interview time with that grandparent. And I know with COVID, this interview may not be in person. It might be over the phone, it might be FaceTiming, it might be with email, something like that. And so that's kind of our next step. Following that, you are going to be needing to get some artifacts and photos. So you maybe want to mention that to grandparents. Do you have to interview, as far as like your parent interview? It could be a step parent, it could be an aunt and uncle, foster parent. It doesn't, everybody's family's different. So it doesn't have to specifically be a blood parent, right, or blood relative. Okay, so these are the next two steps, but the main one to focus on is the parent historical essay. So we have our rubric here, we have our instructions over here, and there's a sample that you can use as well. So if you have questions, let me know, but this will be what we are currently working on. Interview a parent, write the parent historical essay, and start picking out questions to interview a grandparent. That's going to be due right after, well, actually, the grandparent biography is going to be due December 11th. The interview should be completed by right after Thanksgiving. So if you are going to go see a grandparent for Thanksgiving, that could be a good time to interview them, but sometimes holidays aren't always a good time to interview because everybody's busy. All right, your grandparent may not have time to give you, 30 minutes or 45 minutes of interview time. So set up a time to interview a grandparent. Start picking out questions. All right, those questions in the interview should be due by Thanksgiving, and then the actual 2-page biography on a grandparent is going to be due by December 11th. The next thing that's due is October 19th. All right, gives you a couple of weeks to interview a parent and write a 2-page paper, 2-page historical essay on those events that the parent talks about. So that's what I have for today. Please email me if you have questions or talk to me in class, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit about this in class as well, but I just wanted to get you going with Hybrid at Home with this video.